Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as usual, I want to thank my constituents and members of my constituency group that continue to give me tremendous support, and to thank family, friends who are with me through this period. Mr. Speaker, on Monday will be Fishermen's Feast, and I want to say to all the fishermen in Castries South that I hope they have a wonderful day celebrating their, and the whole of St. Lucia celebrating Fishermen's Feast on Monday. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, the fishermen and the guys in Bannans Bay, and I think I've already said to Ratty that I want a special snapper tomorrow, so I hope, all for Sunday, so I'll collect it tomorrow.
Red snapper.
A red snapper. From Beaufort it came from? I'll have to ask him that. So, Mr. Speaker, I commence my presentation, and I know the time on the clock, without any ambiguity. I stand in opposition to the Appropriation Bill 2020-2021. If the budget address was the justification for support for the bill, then the Minister of Finance has failed miserably. The attempts made by members opposite to justify the budget demonstrate that they are all peas of the same pod. They are all complicit. The budget address was a fairy tale story, best title, Alan in Wonderland. This budget was prepared for someone who suffers from a variant of what is called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. A sufferer believes he or she can fool anyone with stories of feats never attained and achievements which are often beyond reason and rational. It involves distortions of truth in mild cases to outright mendaciousness. It causes extreme vindictiveness and a frightening obsession to get back at people. This is what this budget was prepared for. After listening to the budget, I could not help but remember a quote from Alice in Wonderland. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you've read Alice in Wonderland. When Alice said, "If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is, because everything would be what it isn't. And contrary-wise, what is, it wouldn't be. And what it wouldn't be, it would." You see? But the member from Miku South, the Minister of Finance, must be made to understand that he does not have a world of his own, like Alice did, to manipulate and orchestrate to suit his own fancies. This is a real world in St. Lucia, with real people facing real hardships and real struggles to maintain civilized standards of living. And this budget address lacked any empathy, sensitivity, and caring for the real people, for the common man. But is that new for the Prime Minister? How many times has he said one thing, then deny it? How many times has he called us backing dogs and braying donkeys, openly disrespected us and treated us with disdain? If you ever doubted the sincerity of the Prime Minister, just listen to his attempt at contrition on TV. It was like some reality show whose only reality was hypocrisy. I knew as a boy that when you are seeking to repent and be forgiven, that you would go to the priest, tell your sins, then say your rosary. We are, after all, majority Catholic. I'm shocked that a member from Castries North did not tell the PM to see the Archbishop. But after all, they reported him to the Vatican and he was forced to apologize. I learned as a man, when you have hurt and you are genuinely remorseful, you say, I know I have hurt you when I did X or Y, and I was wrong, and I'm asking for a chance to change my ways. Not if I did anything that offended anyone, then I ask for forgiveness. There is no if. There is an acceptance that you have done wrong. So who does he think he has done wrong to? Is it the National Trust? Is it the nice workers? Is it the people whose families have suffered for St. Jude, still not yet completed? Who? Who? Maybe me. For whilst the Prime Minister was asking for forgiveness, they were conniving how to replace the controller of customs to be able to come after me knowing that I have done nothing wrong. And I want to say a few things about this morning, Mr. Speaker, so please bear with me. There's a lot of talk about my vehicle and what should be done with my vehicle. And give me a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, because this thing is going to become a most interesting spectacle in St. Lucia. So it starts with the High Commissioner in London. He is given instructions to find things on Ernest Hilaire. The same gentleman who before he left...
Let me ask you, Honorable Member, because there may come a point in time when the office of the Speaker, if we permit certain things to be said here, or if I permit certain things to be said here, the office of the Speaker may well be asked to give permission for transcripts of proceedings to be heard, to be used in court. I know there is a matter in court currently.
Mr. Speaker,
so I do not want to place ourselves in a matter that, so if this matter, I know the matter is in court, I'm not sure to what extent it is.
Mr. Speaker, I am so thankful to you for remembering that the matter is in court. Because this matter has come up many times in this House. The member from Miku South on the last sitting brought up Jufali. The member from Castries South East. Last night, the member from Ancillary Canaries stood there and was asking me about Jufali. This matter is not about Jufali, Mr. Speaker. It is not. It is not. Can I proceed? And if at the end of it, you believe I have wrong, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, and I want St. Lucians to hear this story because it speaks of the character of this government. It speaks, Mr. Speaker, I'm not the most beautiful pronouncer of words, so people bear with me, I'll make mistakes. The member from Ancillary apparently knows best those things, so we shall see. Mr. Speaker, so he sends a note to the CAPSEC to say that there is a vehicle in St. Lucia which was bought by the High Commission and should be investigated. The Cabinet Secretary sends a note to the Director of Finance and asks to investigate it. And I have all the documents and I can make them documents of the House. Yeah, sure. And then, Mr. Speaker, well, I'm sure my lawyers are listening so they can make copies available for me and I will circulate them to the House. And then, Mr. Speaker, the Director of Finance sends a letter to the Controller of Customs. They made their assessment. And Mr. Speaker, there have been meetings taking place regularly in St. Lucia to get at me. And I said it in the House that I know I'm a markman to investigate my vehicle. Customs invited me to an interview. Now, they thought the controller, for whatever reason, they did not appreciate his professionalism. Because they said he's a supporter of the United Workers' Party, blah, blah, blah. I went to the interview, and the customs officer said to me, the only difficulty they have with this vehicle is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not paid the VAT on it. You are a returning national, Mr. Speaker. And the ministry has not paid the VAT. And I can see the member from South is watching the member from Miku South, wondering what next I will say when I just that. So, Mr. Speaker, So as far as they're concerned, the VAT has to be paid as a returning diplomat, that I don't have to pay duties. And as far as they're concerned, once Foreign Affairs pays the VAT, they would close the matter. And the controller said he cannot take any instruction to go and seize the vehicle and embarrass me. Everybody remember that. It was circulating to all the media that they were going to seize my vehicle outside Parliament. You know what they did? They removed him as acting controller of customs. They removed him. And they put in a young lady who they believe was even more supportive of the UWP. After all, I think it's the Tiroche Community Center. The lands there was actually bought from her family. Lo and behold, she reads the file and then she says she cannot take action. I will not say it here, but I know the exact ministers who gave her the instruction to go and take my vehicle. And that's where I will respect the court matter when it will come. So the customs says they're not doing it. But there are a few customs operators, supporters of the government in there, pushing and edging and scratching their body for the instructions to go and take my vehicle and embarrass me. And somebody really called me and gave me the whole story. And it really baffled me because I was getting pieces from here and there. But somebody called me and gave me the real story. When customs do not do it, they ask the police to do it. The minister responsible for the police has announced publicly that he has an investigative squad that reports directly to him and not the commissioner. Talk about politicization of the police force. That the commissioner of police, they sent 2 police officers to England to investigate me. To investigate me. People I had professional relationships with. Mr. Speaker, I had a life before politics. I had a life before politics, denigrating my name that I had stolen a government vehicle. They spent 2 weeks on taxpayers' money. They paid an IT consultant to download every email from the server at the High Commission to be able to get dirt on me, Mr. Speaker. The police came back, and the police says that there's no offense. The police, from what I am told, said the only issue they had, I had left the High Commission by the time the vehicle came. So to transport it from the dealer to the wharf, they registered it on the High Commission's name. And they said, I stole the vehicle. They came back to St. Lucia. They insist they want the vehicle taken from me and embarrass me. So customs is not doing it. The police is not doing it. But one customs officer has said that he's prepared to go and do the job, and they didn't investigate it properly. And he was asked again to do it, and he submitted an opinion saying he can come and take the vehicle. So I'm saying to Chico, at any time he can come and take the vehicle. I have the keys with me. And if he wants to come for it, come for it. So they're expecting Chico to come and take the vehicle from me. But that's not enough. So you know what they do? The major in the cabinet says, police ain't doing it. Customs ain't doing it. I go do it. So he makes his permanent secretary write a letter to customs to say, I did not register my Jeep properly and documents are missing. So can you send all the documents to their ministry, that's Transport Board, to be able to find out the irregularity and to correct it. So they're hoping now, and the letter was sent last week Friday. I haven't gotten a copy of it yet. The member of Catchy South East, Mr. Speaker, his ministry. You mean his permanent secretary? Well, his country. I don't know why area would do something like this. It's the most ridiculous letter ever written, I am told, by people who have seen it. The Pajua letter, like a Pajua letter. So, Mr. Speaker, the member from Catchy's office now says he'll be able to do it since the police can't do it, customs can't do it. Meanwhile, a customs officer is scratching, he wants instructions to come and take the vehicle. I have the keys. So, Mr. Speaker,
it's not from the Attorney General, it's from
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member said, he said the member for Castries South East say, the police cannot do it, the customs cannot do it, so I will do it. Mr. Speaker, the member needs to withdraw that statement, or else show where this member for Castries. I've not even spoken for today.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'll withdraw it. The member can know my vehicle not in registered properly, but he doesn't know who owns the preschool in Badney. That is attaché, is paying salaries, Mr. Speaker. So let's go, Mr. Speaker. Let's go, Mr. Speaker. So I'm just saying to somebody, what's the big deal about the vehicle? A little vehicle, why are they so? And the person said to me, no, don't be stupid. It's not about the vehicle, it's about you. You want to embarrass you, persecute you. Ask why. Because I am told that the seat has been promised to somebody named Dubule to contest the seat for UWP. Now, I have nothing against the Dubules. Mr. Tony Dubule is one of the nicest men I have ever met. I grew up by the bridge, and I always knew him from a little boy. So there's this guy, Dubule, all over Fuasho, house to house. And I'm wondering, why is he doing house to house? And people are calling me. And they tell me, well, that's the plan. It's never about the lady. In fact, the lady is already given 6.8 acres of land in Goodlands, building a housing development. And they told me, go and see it. I actually went myself, and I saw the works are going on. I can't prove to you from seeing it, but I saw her behind a curtain peeping at me whilst I was there in a greenhouse in Goodlands. So she's not really in the picture. So you promise somebody a free passageway to Castries South. For FNF, FFF, the royal family will be established. And you believe by taking my vehicle from me, you can embarrass me? You think this is going to bring you victory in Castries South? So, Mr. Speaker, when a member from Soufrière says there is no victimization in his government, and he talks about, what's the name, member from Delray North, Archie whose trucks? Archie something trucks, Mr. Speaker. Archie Monroe's. So there's no victimization. Mr. Speaker, I won't say everyone on this side is involved, but most of them are involved. And most of them have been involved, Mr. Speaker. So there is victimization in this country. Go and ask the nice workers. Go and ask the public servants that have been denied promotion right now because they believe they support the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. Go to the technocrats, Mr. Speaker, who try to get jobs in regional organizations and they will stop, Mr. Speaker, because they were working for the Labour Party. Ask Frank Charles, Mr. Speaker, if there is victimization in St. Lucia. But let's go back to the prayer of the Prime Minister. Let's go back to that prayer. I want St. Lucians to reflect on that prayer and to listen carefully to what I am going to say. Mr. Speaker, there is no remorse in that prayer, none at all. There's a difference between regret and remorse. Hey, Mr. Speaker, you know, the more I think about this, the person who wrote this prayer is either a narcissist or they wrote it for a narcissist. Take your pick. Because, Mr. Speaker, when you read the prayer, listen to the words of a narcissist, Mr. Speaker. He says, I am sorry you took it like that. He says, why can't you let it go? It's in the past. He says, you know I didn't mean that. He says, please forgive me. Now, asking for forgiveness is not the same as an apology. Yeah? Now, listen to somebody who has remorse, somebody who cares. That person would say, I'm sorry that I hurt you. What can I do to help you? I see the pain that you're going through. I should not have done this. You have a right to be angry. There's a difference, Mr. Speaker. When you read that prayer, Mr. Speaker, it does not speak of anyone who has any remorse for the way they have treated St. Lucians in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I cannot believe anything that the Prime Minister and the government says. And the people of St. Lucia do not believe what they say. They have lost the trust and the confidence of the people of St. Lucia. Every single member opposite is complicit in the actions of the Prime Minister. And when Judgment Day comes, Election Day, Mr. Speaker, every one of them will have to account and be judged for the support that they give this Prime Minister in the way he treats the people of St. Lucia. And they've tried for the last few days, Mr. Speaker, to boast that Alan Chassé is the best Prime Minister St. Lucia ever had. That's right. I hear them say that's right. And then, Mr. Speaker, they want to attack Philip J. Pierre, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, They went to the extent, Mr. Speaker, that when the member from Beaufort North was pointing out that the Prime Minister himself was breaking the laws that he himself was passing or decreeing, they couldn't believe it. They forgot they have orders, SI that says it is illegal not to wear a mask in public places. And they were shocked at that. They were defending that the Prime Minister does not do that. He had to literally point it out to them, Mr. Speaker. And yesterday I listened to the member from Soufrière, Salty Bus, Mr. Speaker. I listened to him. But let me tell the member from Soufrière, Salty Bus something. Soufrière, Force Jacques, to tell him something. You know, one thing, Mr. Speaker, that no honest and fair person can say is that the member from Castries East is a liar and he is corrupt. No one can say that. You can all continue to say anything about the member, that he stammers, that he is black and as such he does not look like a prime minister. But the Pip that we know is honest, hardworking, humble, caring, and a bright person. Fortunately, he was gifted so by the Almighty and cannot control what you do not like. But he's a child of God, a man of faith, an honest man. Yes, an honest man. And can this Alan and Guy UWP say that they are honest and they are honest in their dealings? Listen to this member from Soufrière. A man cannot change his looks, but he can control his lies, deception, and corruption. Always remember that. Do not underestimate the strength of a humble and quiet man. I listened to the member from Soufrière say that the member from Castries East has no vision because there are no skyscrapers in Masha. And I'm wondering, Miko since 1964 has been represented by UWP, more so by Sir John. Do they have skyscrapers?
Exactly.
Is there no poverty?
Exactly.
And social problems in Miko?
Exactly.
Would you say therefore that Sir John had no vision?
Exactly.
I heard a member from Soufrière said, boasting, that now things so good, ULP is working so hard, there are billboards advertising St. Lucia and taxis with St. Lucia on it. So long, how many years that has been happening? Taxis in London have St. Lucia on it, there are billboards advertising St. Lucia. But for him, that's the greatest achievement. Let me tell the member from Soufrière that he's a Boy Scout. So leave the 5-star general alone. He's a Boy Scout. I heard the member from Babono, and listen to this one. And you know, the member from Beaufort South says he's going to protect you, so I won't say too much. But he is complaining that Labour Party played their hands in the elections in Babono in 2011. And he's saying, of course, which government was in power in 2011 that organized when the elections were held? The United Workers' Party was in government when elections was held in 2011. The Electoral Commission was chaired by Kenneth Morplaisy, QC, a man of integrity. Even if he was Sir John Compton's personal lawyer, he was a man of integrity. The returning officer was his main man, somebody he appointed to many boards. So his government was in power. The commission was chaired by Kenneth Morplaisy, and the returning officer was his main man. I think his name is called Edgar or something like that. But yet he says it's Labour Party that played their hand in the election and thieved the seat from him. As to the member from Ancillary, I'm not going to say much about him, Mr. Speaker. He's already faded away. I just need to remind him one thing. The last election campaign, he was all over talking about the drain, the drain, the drain, the drain. Before you go on to all the things you claim that you have done or will do, one, clear the drain in Ancillary for the people first. Go and do that. When you can do that, you can start talking about Ancillary. So, Mr. Speaker, budget address directly. When the Prime Minister speaks in his closing remarks of we choose unity over division, Mr. Speaker, I think it's page 70 or one of them, how does he reconcile with his obvious disdain for the daughter of Sir John Compton and other St. Lucians? His public denouncement of her And his statement of not even wanting to shake her hands,
It's not the opposite.
when he claims we choose truth over lies and deceit, how does he also reconcile the many blatant lies he has told this nation over the last 4 years? Too many for me to list. It will take my entire hour. And the last one over the last few days is that he was captain of the St. Lucia basketball team. Really? Really? And he says, yeah. He was captain of the St. Lucia basketball team. No basketballer can ever remember. Like the guy said, he used to pay to be on the team and buy uniform for the whole team so they can put him on the team. That's how he ended up playing basketball for St. Lucia. That's how he ended up playing basketball for St. Lucia. He can't get a pick, so his father would buy uniform for the whole team and help pay the effort to go overseas so they can give him a pick. And today he claims he was captain of the St. Lucia basketball team. So, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, the member from Castries East will not lie to you like this. The member from Castries East will never pay his way to be any captain of any team like somebody paid to become leader of their party. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can cry on demand, and now even repenting on demand. He just started appearing on prayer shows asking for forgiveness. Just that. They tell us we just start crying, you just start repenting, and you just start asking people to forgive you. But I'm not talking what lies, Mr. Speaker. Where is the lie? Where is the lie? Where is the lie? No, Mr. Speaker, this budget is a statement of fluff and bluff. In some ways, a real découché budget. Same old promises made over and over. But this time, there are additions. An overkill of promises and offers. Why, Mr. Speaker? In the estimates debate, we describe it as Operation Veglio, a determined effort to bluff and distract people with false promises and baseless hopes, all to secure votes. Let us examine what the budget is supposed to entail. It is supposed to be the policy statement that will guide the implementation of the activities which were presented in the estimates. We were told that a multi-sectoral committee was established to formulate a post-COVID economic revival strategy and plan. Instead, on page 31, we are told that the recovery and resilience plan will be presented to the nation in the coming days. So why this budget presentation when in the coming days you will now present another strategy and another plan? Simply Alan in Wonderland. The member from Castries East will be transparent with you, the people of St. Lucia. We heard a Wonderland presentation, policy statements and announcements which are not rooted in the provisions of the estimate. Half of the presentation was an attempt at cataloging the supposed achievements of the government and to dispense the notion that the government has done nothing in 4 years. Like members on this side have said, 4 wasted years, Mr. Speaker. Never before has a budget presentation been so manger cochon and devoid of substance. So much so that not even the addition of the medium-term development strategy made it sound feasible. You see, Mr. Speaker, there is so much uncertainty about COVID-19 and the untrustworthiness of this government that everyone is skeptical of big promises and glossy plans. And the member from Strozel said so. The people are not listening to those glossy plans anymore. So, Mr. Speaker, it was shocking to hear the Prime Minister speak of government achievements and start as far back as 1964. You now want to convince St. Lucians you've done so much, so you're starting to talk about things Sir John did in 1964. Desperation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've had many disagreements with Sir John's UWP. But this government is not the UWP of Sir John. It is the hijacking of a color and symbol and its use for personal gain and greed. The true UWPs are crying just like the SLPs. There is no concern and care for the traditional UWP supporter or operative. I meet them every day in my constituency, and they cry and are in pain over what passes for their party. They want Sir John to rest in peace. But as long as this Ireland and Guy UWP remains in power, there is no rest for Sir John, no rest for the decent people of St. Lucia. As long as his daughter can be victimized, there will be no rest. As long as long-time UWP operatives are cast aside for speaking out against the Prime Minister, Sir John will never rest in peace. And they tell me that all over the constituency. On page 11, the Prime Minister says that a new economy is emerging, one that is people-centered and inclusive. Where? How? When Sanders can get away with not paying $24 million in taxes, when Ojo Labs can get millions each year, when Cabot can get a loan of over $30 million from pension funds, and when DSH can get away with millions worth of lands, there is no distress fund, no laptops for our children, nice workers are fired, no assistance for the disabled, no medicine for diabetic and hypertensive patients. How is the economy emerging to be people-centered and inclusive? Simply Alan in Wonderland.
Mr. Speaker,
the member from Castries East will always put people first.
Let me
Mr.
get a
Speaker,
point.
always put people
Let me get a
first.
point of order.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker, the member continues to say in this House that nice workers were fired. He continues to mislead the House when it is well established that the NICE project was established for 3 years. And at the end of the period, the NICE contracts were not renewed. That is not firing people. Your contract comes to an end, it comes to an end. The member needs to withdraw that statement. And if he is talking about lies and misleading the House, he is the one misleading the House with false information.
on page 15,
Honorable Member, we've been back and forth over the use of the word fired. I have my own view, and considering my legal background as to the effect of whatever. But just remember that it is something that we've said before, that the contracts came to an end. So from henceforth, remember just that. So.
on page 15, the Prime Minister announces that the Uranura International Airport has finally started. He boasts that when completed...
Honorable Member, I have rule on this point.
Proceed. On page 15, the Prime Minister announces that the Uranura International Airport redevelopment has finally started. He boasts that when completed, we would have a world-class facility managed, owned, and controlled by the people of St. Lucia. Who doubts that? But tell us, why are we borrowing $700 million with interest and charges that would cost us over $1 billion to upgrade an airport when other countries are building brand new airports with half that amount of money? And we are upgrading for $700 million. Of course, when we pay interest and other charges, it's coming close to $1 billion. Close to $1 billion. Why? Tell us why there was no local, regional, or international tender for the contractor for the airport. Tell us. Tell us who are the subcontractors. I can assure you, the member from Castries would be accountable to the people of St. Lucia. On page 18, the Prime Minister speaks of 300 young people employed at Ojo Labs and over 600 trained for the National Apprenticeship Program. For the millions that this government has given to Ojo Labs, they should have created thousands of jobs. And in the last 2 days, we heard that Ojo Labs have raised how many millions of dollars in the United States. How can a company that can be raising millions of dollars in the United States for business expansion be giving our taxpayers money in St. Lucia? And this financial year, they are given monies from the IMF that is given for COVID-related expenditure and for income support. The same Ujo Labs. How can you boast of 600 people trained through the National Apprenticeship Program when NSDC alone used to train more than 600 a year, Mr. Speaker? Alan in Wonderland. But the member from Castries is, I can assure you, will always put St. Lucians first. On page 18, the Prime Minister speaks of healthcare. And Mr. Speaker, I'm waiting for the day we have a debate in this House on healthcare, Mr. Speaker. And he makes the most bizarre statement. Our collective mindset to make it happen without compromising quality is a blueprint for building a new and stronger St. Lucia together. Mr. Speaker, OKEO is in a state of compromise abeyance. It is not what it should be, nor can be, and I won't say much more today. But a constituent of mine died of cancer a few days ago, and I have to repeat her story in this house. The OKEU, he claims, is fully functional and all is well, and St. Lucians are enjoying world-class medical treatment, Mr. Speaker. The young lady paid for free treatments of chemo. She was at Victoria. They moved to OKEU. No chemo treatment at OKEU. She paid for free, she got one. No treatment at OKEU. They are told they had to go to a certain doctor's office, and the cost of it at that time was too much for her. She died, having paid for 2 more rounds of chemo, because OKEU was not offering it. I am now told people who had paid for it can go to the doctor's office and still get it. But she died, she could not get it at OKEU. And that's not my story. That's a constituent family story, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to mention their names for obvious reasons. But, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister talks about OKEU, tell us the truth about OKEU. What's really going on there? Who's running it? How is it managed? How much is it costing St. Lucians? Tell us. And you talk about a new St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker? And we heard there's going to be health insurance. I heard 2 years or 3 years ago, the member from Castries office made his pronouncement. The Minister of Health made a pronouncement. The member from Castries said they were going to give, reminded you, you said that everybody would get a card where they can spend up to $100,000 in medical treatment. Today, we're not hearing much about it. Ask St. Lucians going to OKEU, how much is it costing them to get medical care? On page 19, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister speaks of successes in education. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education used to be one of the glorious stories of success for successive governments. The member of Castries North can tell you about his own achievements in that ministry. But now, Mr. Speaker, this department has now become education. When he was Prime Minister, so I said for successive governments, they can tell you Ministry of Education was a place of pride. It has now become a sad song of despair. When the member from Miko North tells you about education, you fall asleep on you. Nothing new has happened and nothing transformational has been implemented. Not because there is bad stuff, but there's a total confusion in this government about where our education system should be going. And the member of Miku North will always be remembered, together with the member from Miku South, as the people who most famously ended the laptop program and denying thousands of St. Lucian children the chance to own and learn from their own laptop. Common entrance is on Monday, Mr. Speaker, and many students would not have had a device to help them prepare with online learning for common entrance on Monday. CX is in July, and many students have not had, Mr. Speaker, a device to help them prepare for CXC. I heard, Mr. Speaker, the boast of millions spent on schools repairs, and I cringe. Yes, Mr. Speaker, millions were paid out from taxpayers to contractors. But just look at the list of the amounts that are paid to some contractors, and you will weep for St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, there's a leaked invoice for the replacement of a door at a school in Castries East at such cost that people, even supporters of the United West Party, shook their head. They could not imagine it cost so much, Mr. Speaker, to change a door. And I have some photos some students sent me of schools, Mr. Speaker, the millions that they boast of spending in schools, not even a year and a half yet. Roofs falling apart, Mr. Speaker. I can make them documents at the house, Mr. Speaker. Millions of dollars being spent, Mr. Speaker. Shoddy work. Projects not even properly done. Scope of works not reflective of the amount people have been paid for. Mr. Speaker, a St. Lucia Labour Party government under the member from Castries East would have spent millions on purchasing tablets for all school children, ensure Zoom subscription for all schools, and undertake an immediate national Wi-Fi program to make all communities have some form of free public Wi-Fi to ensure that children have access to online learning. That's what the Labour Party in power will do. The member from Castries East would never use the IMF money to fulfill DSH obligations. Right. Mr. Speaker, never. On page 27, we read of achievements in sports, Mr. Speaker. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The Lockerbie contract, $30-odd million, Mr. Speaker, is the most misconceived initiative ever in sports. Now, I will differ with my colleague from Henry South and Grosley. I will differ with them. They have a different strategy. The National Sports Academy cannot be the answer. And Mr. Speaker, I want you to go and drive up by that sports academy and tell me what you see. I hear it's in full operation. I hear people around the Caribbean are urging to come and join the academy. What hogwash is that? Go up Grosley now and see the state of the facility. Incompleted. And parents don't even want to send their children up there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucia Labour Party government will place emphasis on developing the school sports programs as a first step, Mr. Speaker. There's a simple logic, Mr. Speaker, a simple logic. You need athletes to refine for international excellence. You have to produce the athletes. You cannot have all the refinement facilities when you don't have a factory producing the athletes. We need to spend money on the school sports program, the primary schools and the secondary schools. This sports academy and the Labour Party will become a high-performance center for preparing athletes for international and regional competition. And we will spend more money to make sure the convent has better courts, make sure they have sports equipment, make sure the primary schools have PE teachers and coaches. You have to produce the athletes. You have to set up a production facility, Mr. Speaker. And all this glugler, taking out natural grass to put synthetic grass in our climate. Mr. Speaker, who was the brain behind this? Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say a few things. How much am I have left? Half hour, Mr. Speaker? 45? Okay. Mr. Speaker, I want to say a little bit about growth. I want to answer the member from Soufrière, because he stood up, Mr. Speaker, and he was glorifying and banging the desk and saying a lot of things, Mr. Speaker. And I think the member from Castries East alluded to some of it. You know, yes, there have been declining unemployment. Let's not fight over that. Let's not fight over that. Simple. If you have an expansion in the tourism sector, in the tourism thing, of course, more jobs will be created, and there will be some more employment created. We're not going to argue that. The member from Labrie will never argue about that. He's a lot more understanding. And he will never say that there have been no employment created in the country. I can never imagine that. You understand? But the point is that the working age population has declined in St. Lucia. Go to page 121. It's clear. The labor force has declined in St. Lucia. It's there on page 121. Unemployment, Mr. Speaker, listen to me carefully, started declining from the third quarter of 2015. The third quarter of 2015, the St. Lucia Labour Party was in power. St. Lucia started witnessing a decline in unemployment because of the rapid expansion in the tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, between 2016 and 2019, the labor force has declined by 3,600 persons. And of course, we know the number of people who went to Dominica and the Virgin Islands to work. Unemployment, Mr. Speaker, reached its lowest in 2007 under the St. Lucia Labour Party government, Mr. Speaker. And the member from Castries North will tell you, Mr. Speaker, from that low point, unemployment started increasing every single year from 2008 until 2015 when it started to go back down, Mr. Speaker. So the government boasts, and the member from Soufrière is boasting, growth, 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 growth. Mr. Speaker, I've said over and over, growth means nothing if the people cannot benefit from it. Yes, if you cannot have the ching-ching in your pocket, that growth means nothing, Mr. Speaker. But there has been some growth, Mr. Speaker. Again, let's not argue about it. The member from Mikus, from Beaufort South, last night dealt with it in greater detail. So there have been some growth, and he analyzed it sufficiently. I don't have to repeat it. Any government, Mr. Speaker, that has borrowed as much as this government should have had higher levels of growth than what they're boasting of. For a government that has borrowed over $1 billion over 4 years, we should have seen far greater growth, Mr. Speaker. With all the growth in tourism and the economy, where is the money? And I want you to focus on this one, Mr. Speaker. Where is the money? Who benefits from it? So, for example, we would have spent over $30 million on schools. But look at how the monies have been spent. You can always allocate, but how much is actually spent? A set of overinflated projects to allow for corruption and substandard, overpriced work, Mr. Speaker. And I have pictures to show you from some of the schools. We have been taxed to build roads, Mr. Speaker, and yet we still borrow massively to build more roads, Mr. Speaker. And we didn't have no $1.50. And I keep saying to the man from Castries North that he promised to redo the roads in Marigot and in Basse Joseph. And I will always hold it against him if he do not give the people of Marigot and Basse Joseph, Mr. Speaker, their roads, Mr. Speaker. With all the growth and spending, I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, if there was no squandering, no corruption, and no largesse for FFF, we would be awash with money. There would be no need to cut public servants' salaries, Mr. Speaker. So yes, there have been massive borrowing to finance growth, and contracts given all over the place to the usual subcontractors without any tendering. With all your accomplishment and all, Mr. If you listen, Mr. Speaker.
You have 15 minutes in which to come.
The member from Castries Central, the member from Grosile, the member from Soufrière, all of them boast of all their achievements. And if you've had so many achievements, why are the people in the country still suffering so badly, Mr. Speaker? Why are they suffering so badly? And I asked the constituents that, and you know what they said to me? Because people want to know where all the money gone, plain and simple. You hear about Wasco Dam desilting, and Mr. Speaker, I raised it in the last sitting, and the member from Babono objected, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell you for a fact, Mr. Speaker, that the process used to select the contractor was questionable. And if one says it's not questionable from the regard of costs and whatnot, the person did not have the capacity to do the work. And almost 3 years later, we still cannot finish the site preparation works for the desilting to start. And Wasco had to step in to assist and find out the relationship between who has the contract and who's who in government, Mr. Speaker. So we have a man-made drought in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And my friend from Babono, he has to be ashamed, Mr. Speaker. He has to be. Mr. Speaker, we look at the CIP, Mr. Speaker. You cannot interrupt it because it's true. I'm not even giving out all the details today. Mr. Speaker, the CIP, Mr. Speaker, it has to be revised and reorganized. And the point was made from the member from Castries East, or was it one of the other, my colleagues, that no other government has had a revenue stream like the CIP. But people are still asking where the money gone. That is government, Mr. Speaker. I believe they've underperformed, but they've had almost $150 million in revenue from the CIP. In the last 3.5, 4 years, they've made 150. Dominica has made about 800 million. Something is wrong, Mr. Speaker. Something must be wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Prime Minister speak about community tourism. And I noted, Mr. Speaker, that Marigot was left out. Marigot was left out. The two most scenic spots in St. Lucia are the Peters and Marigot Bay. But Marigot was left out. But that will be corrected, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister believed he played an excellent shot. A real nice cover drive, like Sean Edwards used to play in his days, Mr. Speaker. They offered duty-free workers, Mr. Speaker. They offered duty-free workers. Well, they offered essential service, workers, Mr. Speaker, duty-free vehicles. Now, Mr. Speaker, we need to sit down and reflect and ask a few questions. Because we have learned that you cannot trust anything the Prime Minister says. Anything he says, you need to sit down, you need to reflect on it, and to really ask him a few more questions. So I need to ask, are the duty-free offer for all public servants? If not, who are essential workers? It says essential workers including nurses, doctors, police, and firemen. So are essential workers all the persons who had work performing essential services during the time of COVID? So all the statutory bodies had senior management going to work, performing essential services. Do they qualify for it? Because it says for essential service workers.
5 years, right? 5 years.
And they had to have been working for 5 years. If you have been rewarded for your contribution in the fight against COVID, why must it be tied to you having worked for 5 years in the public service? If it is compensation for your hard work, there should be nothing about you having hard work. Because the person who's been there for 2-3 years could have worked harder than somebody who's been there for 10 years. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense? Why was duty-free exemption not granted last year during public sector negotiations when they begged for it? Not even the traveling officers who needed it. So why now when the country is in recession? And tell me thirdly, what is duty-free? Is it exemption from import duty, from excise tax, from VAT, and from service charge? What do you mean by duty-free? What do you mean by duty-free? When does it commence and when does it end? When does it commence and when does it end? Is there a value placed on it, Mr. Speaker? Is it only for vehicles below $100,000, below $150,000? They offer to bus drivers and taxi drivers. Is it a bus driver or is it a bus owner? It says for bus drivers. So is it the people literally driving the buses? Or is it for the owners? And will ministers who are bus owners also qualify as bus owner? Of course. Vous voulez pour toutes? Yeah. Mr. Speaker, is it for replacement of existing buses or buying new buses? So is it only when you replace an old bus you can get duty free when you replace it, or can you use it to buy new buses, Mr. Speaker? If new buses, will new road bans be issued? There are so many questions that need to be asked, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm not against anyone receiving a duty free on vehicles. I am not against it. And I tell, if all public servants can get it, I'd be happy for them, Mr. Speaker. But think about it, Mr. Speaker. Think about it. Wouldn't it make more sense, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable.
Wouldn't it make more sense, Mr. Speaker, to say to public servants, you'll get duty-free on any importation of materials for repair or, expansion of your homes, rather than offering them duty-free vehicles? I can understand traveling officers, you're offering it to them. But there are public servants that want to repair their homes. They want to add a little bedroom because their daughter is now becoming 17 years of age and they wanted to have her own little place to stay. Why not do that? Why doesn't the government think of guaranteeing the first $100,000 of mortgages for public servants? Or even the government saying, Mr. Speaker, that the 10% you need to deposit in the bank, the government will guarantee it for you. So you don't need to deposit 10%, Mr. Speaker. A St. Lucia Labour Party and the Philip J. Pierre will do exactly that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government has a section in this budget address called the COVID response. Too little, too late. The government response to COVID has been farcical, artificial, and just bluff. 6 pages out of 74 relates to the COVID response. 6 pages out of 74, Mr. Speaker, deals with the COVID response. And at the end of it, hear what the Prime Minister says. You must listen to that one, Mr. Speaker. After 6 pages on the COVID response, he says, further details on the administrative arrangements for these measures will be communicated shortly. But why are you coming to present a budget telling persons these are your responses to the COVID crisis, but further details on the administrative arrangements will be communicated shortly? Wait for the shortly and then come and announce it. That's how you do it. Wait for the shortly and then come and announce it. Mr. Speaker, people in Search have been waiting since March for assistance. March. For 4 hours you made a presentation to tell people at the end of it, you will give them further details shortly. Mr. Speaker, there are sectors that are crying out for help. Crying out for help, Mr. Speaker. Let me just pick out one. There's so many. Well, vendors, Mr. Speaker, musicians, preschools, Mr. Speaker. And I want to speak about preschools. And not because a member from Castle South East is alleged to be involved in the preschool. I think he's denied that he owns the preschool or he's involved. Although I have seen evidence and read evidence to the contrary, but I will let him, since he's suing, I won't go into the details, Mr. Speaker, because he's threatened to sue, Mr. Speaker. So I won't come to the details. I want to see him sue and win that case. But, Mr. Speaker, preschoolers, the owners of preschools, Mr. Speaker. These are people, the private preschools, Mr. Speaker. They are renting for buildings, $4,000 a month, $5,000 a month. There is nothing going on. How will they reopen in September? Who is looking after them, Mr. Speaker? There will be protocols to be put in place. Who is the system to make sure the protocols can be met? The parents of the children that will be coming themselves are suffering. How is it going to work, Mr. Speaker? Nobody has spoken to them and told them exactly what they will be getting and when they will be getting it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so many sectors. The creative arts, Mr. Speaker. They keep promising, and nothing is happening, Mr. Speaker. They said they will be distributing 10,000 meals a day for 6 weeks. 10,000 meals a week for 6 weeks. 10,000 meals a day for 6 weeks. Where has that happened, Mr. Speaker? Where is the money from the telephone? Where is the money from the telephone that St. Lucians contributed? Mr. Speaker, this government is bluff and fluff, Mr. Speaker. There's been no empathy, no sensitivity, and no care, Mr. Speaker. The COVID virus has exposed the core of the United Workers' Party. It cares little about people. It cares little about the common man. It cares about big projects, big spending that will benefit the FFF. Mr. Speaker, I listened to this budget to hear what is the government response to the rising prices in the supermarkets. Massey issued a statement about the rising prices in supermarkets, but the government cannot issue a statement. And I listened to the member from Strozel responsible for commerce. Did he explain why people are seeing such huge increases in prices? The first thing the government does is to deny it. And then Massey issues a statement admitting it's happening. And Massey explained why. They explain why. I'm not saying Shasta. I don't think Shasta would increase prices, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the prohibitive trades. And Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side are trying to explain to me, oh, we're making it look as worse than it is. It's not bad. Mr. Speaker, when in times of COVID, when in these present times, Mr. Speaker, when in these present times, Mr. Speaker, people are suffering, People are under psychological stress, Mr. Speaker. They're worrying about where the next meal will come from. The worst thing you can do is to go and announce licenses to them, Mr. Speaker. It's about sensitivity, Mr. Speaker. I'm not arguing with you about whether you should have license, should not have license. That debate will come when we table the negative resolution in this House for the next sitting of Parliament. But tell me that you don't have that sensitivity, that empathy to understand right now when people are suffering, people that are making calls, people that are selling pudding, you want to make an issue of you requiring to have licenses, Mr. Speaker? And even if any technical person in any ministry brings that up and that comes to cabinet, somebody in cabinet should have the sensitivity to say, gentlemen, now is not the right time to talk about that. You tell me nobody in there have the heart, not even a member from Castries Central, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not talking about the tango and all those things that's going to happen, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to wrap up now, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to wrap up, Mr. Speaker. You know, whenever I need inspiration, Mr. Speaker, I go back to my days in the National Youth Council. I go back to my days as a student and a youth leader, Mr. Speaker. You know, I got a certain consciousness in the youth movement, Mr. Speaker. And I want you to reflect, Mr. Speaker, because you too went through similar experience with me. And somehow along the way you lost your direction and ended on this side, Mr. Speaker. But, Speaker, you know, it is a consciousness that defined us, Mr. Speaker. You know, this government, Mr. Speaker, this government, Mr. Speaker, has a preoccupation with growth rather than with development, Mr. Speaker. Growth is needed for development, but growth is a means to an end and not an end in itself, Mr. Speaker. So when this government keeps boasting about growth, Mr. Speaker, yes, the economy needs to grow. But if it grows and the benefit of that growth cannot be used and spread to the people, then growth is meaningless. That growth is designed solely for the FFF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to quote from a collection of speeches from the then president of the NYC 35 years ago, Mario Michel. And he expressed the sentiments of a whole generation of us on this very subject of growth and development, on capital resource accumulation and human resource development. And speaking on the role of youth in developing societies, 35 years ago, he said, what youth need to do as stimulators and agents of change is to ensure that the governments turn away from an emphasis on capital resource accumulation to human resource development, thus ensuring that human resource development becomes the core element in national development policies. It is not being advocated here that government should curtail any policies for capital resource accumulation, but only that they should not pursue such policies to the exclusion of policies for the development of human resources. The two should go hand in hand. But if the human factor being dominant, words stated 35 years ago. So when people speak, when we on this side speak of people come first and people matter most, this is our core belief. When we speak of participatory democracy and the people being at the center of development, this is our raison d'etre. Yet we were called communists and banned. When we went to Cuba to study, we were outcasts. Today we praise Cuba for its contribution. It is our belief, Mr. Speaker, that there must be a priority in favor of our youth, and that youth must be the stimulators and the change, agents of change, Mr. Speaker. That is the center focus of the next SLP government, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we speak of the youth economy. The youth economy, Mr. Speaker, will be a critical element of the programs of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. We plan, Mr. Speaker, to transform the talents of young people from the suffocating confines of living rooms, playing fields, street corners, and classrooms, and transform it to valuable economic output creating employment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to quote somebody, well, before I even say that, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has said that we will be going to the polls soon. I heard some of his ministers says it will be next year. Don't be fooled. It will be soon. I can never be fooled by some saying next year. It will be soon, Mr. Speaker. It's about time, Prime Minister. It's about time you do it, Mr. Speaker. Because I'm quoting a former parliamentarian, George Odlum, Mr. Speaker, when he said, this government is like a phlegm on the chest of St. Lucians, and they are just waiting to exhale, Mr. Speaker. So to the members on the other side, I quote from Alice in Wonderland once again. Time is drowning, hearts are burning, heads are rolling, nothing can save you now. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And I will add, Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, your time has run out. People first, people first. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. I thank you very much.